Okay, I call the meeting of the Cleveland Heights University Heights Board of Education to order. Mr. Gaynor, would you call the roll?
Mr. Register,
Here.
Mr. Posh.
Here.
Mr. Zucker,
Yeah, here.
Mr. Silverman.
Here.
Ms. Ray.
Yeah. Okay, I'll accept a motion to approve minutes from, it looks like, August 31st,
Yep.
September 5th, September 19th, and September 29th.
So moved. 25th.
25th, sorry. I'll accept the motion.
Second. He did.
All right.
I move in second.
Any discussions, any changes, modifications? Okay, Mr. Gaynor, would you call the roll?
The voting is open.
Come on. All right, that's all I have.
The voting is closed.
Okay, that motion passes. So that moves us to, do we have any public address?
Master teachers first.
No public address, no statements from the audience. And so we move to the superintendent's report.
Okay, good evening, everyone. So first, I want to start, I'm giving this to you, board members, just a CTE update. As you recall, we had our joint meeting with the city, and there were some questions that they asked about our CTE data. And I stated that I would bring that to the board, and we can forward it to the Cleveland Heights Council as well. You will see we have remember we have the 5 districts now in our consortium. We have 25 programs serving 762 students. 633 of those students are Cleveland Heights students, and we see a 12% increase from last year. And on the back of that paper that you have, I actually highlighted all of the programs that we have and the students and the districts that are housed in each of the programs. So you'll see that on the back of your of that sheet. So thank you to Brad Callender, who was able to supply that data for us. Our Bond Accountability Commission, we have our first meeting next Tuesday, and that is a committee that consists of 8 community members, 2 board members, and 5 staff members. So we're excited about that. The responsibilities of that commission would be to monitor project budgets, expenditures, and schedules, and we would share relevant items with the committee for discussions. We've also officially applied for our PYP authorization in Fairfax. Remember, we recognized Monticello last month. Leslie, who was here, there's IB coordinator, talked about that we were pushing a button this year, so she officially pushed a button last week. So we're excited for Fairfax. The Educational Services team started their site visits and walkthroughs this month, so they will be out in our buildings. They were out at Roxborough Elementary Monday. So the entire team is walking through classrooms, having conversations with teachers and the building principals about our curriculum, making sure that we are implementing our curriculum with fidelity. So they're going to do that entire this month, and I think again in February. Community chats. We had the first community chat at Stone Oven. So we had community members, parents, and students. Great conversations that we had there, and I'm looking forward to the next one, which is on Friday, October 21st. And I think we're at Phoenix Coffee, if I'm not mistaken. Phoenix Coffee. Not sure yet? Okay. So we'll follow with the actual place, but it is on Friday, October 21st. Last week, I had an opportunity to represent the district at Ohio Public School Advocacy Network Visioning Retreat at Mohican State Park. There were 25 superintendents that were chosen from across the state, urban, suburban, and rural districts. In Cuyahoga County, there were 3 of us, myself, Mayfield, and Olmsted Falls. So the purpose of this committee is to think about what Ohio public education means. And they're asking us to have some community conversations with community members about that. And hopefully that we come up with a vision statement that will go in with the State Department strategic plan. So I'm going to convene, we can kind of talk a little more about it, convene some community stakeholders so we can have some conversations about what public education means to our community. And it's interesting, they chose districts who they believe that has some impact at the state level. So the honor that they believe Cleveland Heights has a voice and has some impact in this work. So I was honored to be able to serve as we have on our district on this committee. So that's it for my
When
superintendent's
do
report.
you have to report back?
I have-
When you convening again?
When it's in 60 days. I have to do it before 60, in 60 days. So that can happen,
So that means December.
yes. I have to do it before December. So looking forward so we can talk about who we believe need to be a part of that discussion. And we came up with a purpose statement and some beliefs statements to go around that. So they want the reactions of our individual communities around those statements. So it's really good work for 2 days with that think tank group. And it's interesting when you think of rural counties or some superintendents that have only 250 students in their school district. And so their issues are very different from ours, but we all believe in a public education system that works for all kids. So how do we have conversations and have a purpose statement and belief statements that will benefit all of us? So I thought it was interesting, and so I was honored to be able to serve on that team.
Yeah, were there any other districts in our ring that was invited to the table?
Yes, Mayfield and Olmsted Falls. Yeah, yeah. So, and then I think the largest district that was there was probably Athens. And there were some little towns I'd never heard of, so it was interesting meeting with those superintendents. I'm saying that their issues are very different, so I'd say it would be kind of interesting that we kind of trade places for a day. Because the farming towns, they just have very different, and their communities don't want to consolidate schools. It's not anything they're thinking about, and so education looks very different in those communities, yeah.
The bond accountability
Commission.
commission. What board members are going to be serving on that?
It's yourself and Eric.
Eric. Okay, so we're going to just continue over from the FAC.
Correct.
Good.
That was,
Okay.
yeah.
That's what I assumed.
Yes. Yeah, and then if you check out the website, you see pictures of all the members, except for 2. We're still waiting on 2 other photos. But it's on the website. You check out the picture, Eric. And since it will be a superintendent's committee, it will be open to the public. We take our minutes, roll call, all of that will happen for those
That's
meetings.
great.
And we already have our agenda set for next week. The agenda is set. So there'll be a long meeting. We're going to talk about our charter and the purpose of the work and some things. So it's probably, the first meeting is probably going to be a little long, but we're excited about this team coming together.
Well, I like the fact that there's existing members who were on the FAC.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
to continue the continuity between groups,
Yeah.
I think is important.
That's true. Agreed.
So, good, thanks.
Okay.
Okay, you still got the floor. Want the first reading
The
of the...
first reading
on
of
the
our
attendance
attendance
policy.
policy, yes. Okay.
And this is because of the state law that was?
Yes. Who's coming
just
up? Oh,
passed?
Paul, thank you.
We have to make
Yeah,
a motion.
I'll make a motion first, yeah.
Good evening.
One reading?
No, it's his first reading,
Yeah.
yeah.
No.
I'm going to hand you 2 things. Here's the attendance policy, which we're talking about the first reading. For our policies, there are 3 readings. For this one, because this came late summer, this will be the first reading for the attendance policy. And then we did have, there's another handout. These are the notes and an update on the 54 policies. This would be the second reading for the second batch of policies.
Okay.
So again, there's no action taken, but that need to be taken by the board tonight on policies. But if you look at the attendance policy, that would be the first reading. So if you have any questions, again, there'll be 2 more readings on this. You can send those to me, and I'll be happy to gather that information for you.
I did have a question, because you'd sent this, the majority, in my mind, of what's in the attendance policy is sort of this, talking about what the Infinite Campus attendance codes are. And again, I'm going to ask the same question I asked last time about policy. Is that something that belongs in policy? Because I would think that those attendance codes could potentially change. I don't know if I'm right about that, and you guys could tell me differently. Or is that more, again, is having the codes in policy a necessity? Is there a, it just seems like a lot of overhead for policy.
Yes, and this would be something that we have placed in our policies before because we consistently use this out of Infinite Campus. So yeah, this is something that we've always placed in our attendance policy.
And so again, I don't mean to argue with you about it.
Oh,
all.
sure.
I mean, it's fine with me if it's in there. From my standpoint, I would say that Infinite, Campus is what we're using for attendance, given a set of Infinite Campus codes, and then that's all that really, for me, belongs in policy. And then the codes are defined in the administrative policies for Infinite Campus. But again, if we think it's a better idea to have it in the policy, it's fine with me. Also, it's just not a big issue to me. I just tried to mention it.
Karen, did you want to?
Well, I was going to talk about the House bill, the reason we actually have this policy change, but we can come back to that. Okay.
All right, and the second handout I gave you, the board did ask some questions or some changes with some of the policies, and I did go through and make some notes. I know there were a number of policies that had names in them, and I know, Cal, you brought up, should we keep the names or should we just put the positions? I did check on that with legal, and they said best practice coming from the Office of Civil Rights advises us having names in there helps remove the barriers so people know who to contact. So it makes sense to keep those names in there, and if names do change, we'll just bring it back to the board if the board's comfortable with that.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Okay, were there any other questions on the other policies?
I just have one question, which is really more in regard to the board docs, is that sort of from a logistical standpoint, that reviewing it with a hard copy, as much as I don't like having multiple hard copies, but it's a lot easier than 30 different individual unique PDFs. I guess the question I pose is that because each policy, each sub-policy is treated as a separate document because it's...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we had to upload it that way into board docs.
I understand, it sort of is cumbersome for reviewing, but again, that's, any opportunity I can take to make fun of technology, making things better, I'll take, so.
Okay.
Well, we discussed this, you and I discussed this also, that PDFs are not necessarily conducive to making notes.
Right.
You can attach little pasted notes associated, effectively on them, but, and I know you don't want to circulate a Word document because that allows changes, so I mean, I think there are, to Eric's point, there are some limitations that technology impose because.
Yes, I agree.
I guess what I would suggest is that for the board going forward in 2018, as we migrate over to board docs for this, try to identify a smoother process, if you will, for that. It would be a suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Yep, we'll look at that.
So I have a question, and it's somewhat related to the conversation we had in the calendar committee earlier on, well, last week. Well, it came up that there's thoughts about having a staggered start. And I know that's something that I think staff is working on, and it'll eventually be presented to us. Maybe not.
The staggered start?
Not a staggered start, but a delayed start. So if there's a winter storm, instead of taking the whole day off, there'd be like a 2-hour.
2-hour delay for
Bar delay.
emergencies. Okay, yes,
So
yes, okay.
And I
Okay.
presume that's sort of a work in progress.
Yeah.
At this point, nothing to announce or anything, but is there, how does that affect this attendance policy? And again, this is the first reading, if you guys can maybe get back
Okay.
with us about that. Also, last week, we had a heat day. We didn't have a heat day, but other districts had a heat day. Does it make sense for us to consider that for buildings that don't have air conditioning in them? Again, not something to,
I know a couple years ago, maybe my first year, there was a conversation that we had with Ari about some heat index. I think it was a very hot year, that 2014-15. And so we've talked about it among the first ring districts about what that would look like. But the conversation always went back to, we have old buildings in our districts, and how many days are enough? That what if you have a bad winter, then you are losing perhaps some of those days for the heat index days, and then your winter days, and then you're in school during spring break and other holidays. So I told Ari after this last couple hot days that we could revisit the conversation and talk about what that would mean for our district if we were to look at those types of days.
okay,
So-
just curious to see if
Yeah.
the conversation's happening.
Yeah, it happened a couple years ago, if I recall, and then we more recently talked about we would revisit that, having that conversation. And I think Ari's here, he can,
Well, I mean, I think it also helps. I mean, the high school's all air conditioned. 2 years from now, all the middle schools will
Correct.
be air conditioned, yay.
yeah,
And we're sort of thinking in the future of
Right.
what we're doing with the elementary schools.
yeah,
It's a perfect segue to have that
the
conversation.
conversation. Right. And I would say kudos to our administrators and our teachers. I mean, our food service vendors provided additional water and et cetera, and it was hot. So, I mean, it was, in some of the buildings, it was hotter than others. And we don't want anyone to work in those conditions, but our teachers came and they did, and kudos to them, but that's not what we want to happen all year in any building, so.
Well, tomorrow's supposed to be another hot day. I mean, there's something that I saw is going to be 88 tomorrow, but who knows what it's going to be.
Exactly.
Okay, and you won't know until
Right,
the day happens,
right,
okay?
yeah.
But hearing the stories from some of your staff members that were in the calendar committee
Committee,
meeting too, I mean, there's a lot of, they're up on the roof fixing things. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not easy in some of these old buildings
Right,
that have old equipment, and
Right. I agree.
Just so I understand, the process-wise, ultimately, it's at the discretion of the superintendent. I mean, that is the way the decision, maybe not really a board-level decision. It's worth talking about the conversation, but it's
Right.
the superintendent's discretion when schools are open or closed.
true, but there's
Mm-hmm.
policy around that, and obviously, and how do we deal with that?
Right.
I have a question.
Sure.
Here in the attendance policy, it states that legitimate excuses for the absence of students who are otherwise habitually truant include but not limited to. The student was excused from attendance in accordance with the R.C.332104. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, it's the Ohio Revised Code. So according to the law, students can be excused for certain things. If they have a doctor's note, they can be excused for a variety of things that are laid out in the Ohio Revised Code.
Okay. And can I find this definition in?
The Ohio Revised
Yeah,
Code?
yeah.
I can go ahead and send that to everyone,
Yeah.
so you can see that,
You
sure.
can, yeah,
Absolutely.
send it to me. Thank you.
All right, anything else?
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ron.
So the last one was a field trip.
We can't find that on our, can we click that, open? What did it look like?
Yeah.
I clicked on it and I got
Yeah.
Cami or something.
Oh, yeah, I used to get this there.
Here it
Okay,
is.
let's click that. Okay, I clicked that.
Do you not trust Mark Sack?
Well,
we're
I'm
just
not,
going to that. Yeah, yeah,
I'm
okay.
not sure.
We're here-
I guess
it's
I
not-
want to go on a field trip to Cami too.
No,
Is that,
I always want to go on the field trips.
It's a good one.
okay, what happened?
yeah, we got to work on that. Mine is something that, a website that we're not sure why it comes up. It used to come up on mine too, so. So we could share.
Okay,
Okay. So we have Mark Stack and Odacia Blue.
okay.
Are taking, yep.
Yeah, I
Okay,
can
gotcha.
look at this real quick. Okay.
Oh, there you go. Is it the Holocaust?
Oh, I'm so used to
Yeah.
this.
I know.
Okay, I got it.
Yeah.
So I need a motion to approve the field
So
trip to the Cincinnati.
Second.
Any questions or discussion? Mr. Gaynor?
Okay, we're having technical difficulty. Saying there's no motion, so I guess I'll have to do a verbal on that one.
Okay,
Mr. Register,
yes.
Mr. Posh.
Yes.
Mr. Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Silverman,
Yes.
Ms. Wright.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passes. And that puts us on E1 through 4. I'll accept the motion.
So moved.
Second.
Any particular conversation?
I guess the one question I would pose is we're voting on supplementals for positions that have already begun. Am I reading that correctly? Because, okay. Wouldn't we normally see these earlier? I mean, it's sort of, no? Okay, okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Gaynor?
Voting is open.
This is just saying approval for resignation.
We doing one at a time?
No, it's a consent agenda, it should be for all.
Just showing up as one.
It shows all as consent.
Okay.
Voting's closed.
Mm-hmm.
Right now.
What is it, technical difficulties?
Yeah,
I think we got it.
acting up a little bit.
All righty.
Serious today.
All right. So now we'll,
We got to call the roll?
No, I got it.
got it.
Next.
Business
Or
services?
business service.
So we already did.
Right.
Okay, so we're business services. E,
F.
F, 1 through
No, gotta do them separately. Gotta do them separately.
F1. I'll accept the motion to approve F1.
So moved.
Second.
Any conversations?
What's the, only because they're in the room, it says Reaching Heights has a attached PDF. These are just all little service contracts we have with folks?
Right. These are just typical quarterly contracts that
Okay.
come before you.
Cammy loves me.
And then just use mine.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
I'm just, it's different.
Yeah, okay.
Voting's
Okay.
open on that item, that's right. The voting's open on that item.
Okay. So we're at E2.
Waiting for Beverly.
Okay.
Okay, voting's closed on item 1.
Okay. Buses.
I can't see it or what?
Buses.
It's approved? Okay. The motion carries. I'll accept the motion on E3.
2. F2.
No, F3, I'm sorry.
F2.
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 So moved.
Second.
I'm assuming we're purchasing these through the bus consortium?
This is through this Ohio School Council Bus Consortium, yes, sir.
We have how many buses?
36, I can get you to
We're in a
actually.
regular cycle of.
This is the typical cycle, 3-year. Keeps us in line with the oldest bus we have on the road is 10 years old.
And from jumping ahead and looking at the waivers, I'm not incorrect to say that approximately 1/2 of the students we transport are non-public students, correct?
Close.
So it's almost a ratio of 1-to-1 as far as our transportation needs. Okay. And the reason why I'm going with that is that if we weren't transporting so many non-public students, we wouldn't need so many buses.
If the law wasn't in place, we would not have to comply with it, right?
And we also we also,
Well played.
but we do, I believe the state says more than 2 miles away, we have the rule as 1 mile away.
Yes, for our elementary school
Right.
students, yes.
Gotcha, okay.
George, just a curiosity question. The least expensive bus, not by a lot, is the wheelchair accessible bus with the same number of passengers? Is that logical?
That is it's a typo. It's not. The wheelchair piece takes up space in the back, so I'll confirm that it's a few less.
That's fine. I just.
So it's a smaller capacity bus, same size.
Right, not by much, but same, yeah, it's
Okay,
same.
that makes more sense. Okay, thanks.
Also, right now, we currently, our bus depot is over at Park Synagogue. How much longer do we have on our arrangement with them?
Currently, it's for the next 2 years.
Do we, I assume we're at the beginning of discussions of what we're gonna do at the end of 2 years, correct?
I'm going to get to that point. Right now, I'm trying to focus on emptying out 2 middle schools, but once once that's in place,
Okay.
I'll start focusing on leases. We have the lease across the street that we have to, we won't
right,
need
right.
anymore. And more importantly, Park Synagogue, do we want to extend it? We have to have a plan. You're right, in 2 years, what are we going to do with our buses?
So you're anticipating, once you get over the hump, if you will, on the middle schools, then start focusing on, okay.
Yes,
It's in the
and over the hump, it for me is going to be probably when Turner Construction takes
Gotcha.
control of the
Okay.
building. I have a lot of things to worry about before that day
So
happens.
first quarter, second quarter of 18, then you'll start working on this?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else?
Well, the voting is open. The voting's closed.
F2 passes, so we're in the bus business again. And in addition, we want to try to approve F3, which is payments in lieu of transportation.
Yes, sir.
You need a motion?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
A lot of,
Any discussion?
Now, these are the names that are eligible. They are not all the individuals that will apply. So the list that was provided to you are based on our exemption from the state. Those are all the eligible riders. If the parents apply for payment in lieu of, then we would be obligated to pay it.
Do we have any sense of what percentage we usually end up paying?
In fact, I do. I don't have it in a percentage. I asked Mr. Smith to send me what happened last year, because I had sent curious also with, so last year we had out of a list similar to that, whatever, I can't remember the numbers, we only had 120 students that have actually applied for and received payment in lieu of, and that's currently $250.
George, it may be worth, just for anyone listening who doesn't understand, just explaining what this is.
Payment in lieu is when we deem a school it's a challenge for us to transport students there. So based on Ohio law, we can then submit for an exception to transportation. When we receive it, then the parents that have children that go to the school can receive payment in lieu of as an option for transportation of their child.
And again, that's because we follow the law, as you pointed out
Right.
before. Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Gaynor?
Voting is open. Okay, voting is closed.
Okay, the motion passes. I'll accept a motion for E4.
so moved.
Second.
This is a resolution authorizing the execution of a contract with WR Restoration. Any discussion?
I have a question. We're about to spend $15 million and put fencing up around the middle school at Monticello, so why are we doing this as a separate
So
item?
this is why I put on the board agenda, and I apologize, this is now in board docs, but since it was just, I just received this from our attorney, wanted to make sure that you were getting the proper law quoted, and it's uploaded, so I wanted to give you a hard copy. It's a memo basically explaining what we're doing. We talked briefly about Monticello's needs as far as the tuck pointing goes, and we were looking at about $500,000 worth of work if we wanted to do it right. What I actually did was ask Taylor Consulting to go out and look at if we have an opportunity to get some work done immediately before we turn the building over to Turner Construction, what would be the most critical pieces and parts? There's some lintels that need repair and tuck pointing and different parts of the building. After that assessment, he came back and he had some spaces, some square footage numbers, and he went to the current contractor that just completed Rocks Elementary. So what we did is we got that company to agree to carrying the current square footage cost that he applied and basically beat out, I think it was 7 other bidders on that project. And consulting with Matt Sagone from Squires, you know, the law, and I attached a law to the back of that, was recently, they raised the limit for non-competitive bidding to $50,000. Our board policy has not been changed. It still says it's 25. But what, based on state law, you can approve this resolution authorizing WR Restoration to do that work, maintaining the same square footage that we're holding them to, pricing from Rocks Elementary. And we're going to accomplish the critical pieces that we feel are necessary before we turn the building over.
So this is basically a section of the work in Monticello that is critical.
Right. And it's on Yellowstone's, the Yellowstone side of the building is where the majority of it's at. And it's all pieced out. I have another drawing where he actually specifies the points. So he took the contractor out there, they reviewed it together. He came back with 30, what was that? I can't, I have the numbers in there. It's actually substantially below the 50,000, 35,000, right?
35,688.
So being below the $50,000, we're not obligated to get competitive pricing, which I would be uncomfortable with that amount of money, but holding him to the same square footage that was bid last year, and he was, as you see in the memo, substantially below the next competitive pricing, so he's maintained that pricing for us.
So this is masonry work that you're going to do over the winter time?
He's going to do it right now.
Okay,
If
so
you approve this, he's ready to staff his people over the next month and complete this.
we don't have to worry about it
No.
carrying over?
Right.
I mean, they did a beautiful job at Roxelle.
Right.
Just really beautiful, so.
We'd love to do more, but again, we feel these would be some active leaks if we don't address them now. We would be addressing them once we open the school back up.
Okay. Mr. Gaynor.
Voting is open. Voting is closed.
Okay, the motion passes. So we're ready for a motion for F5.
So moved.
Second.
These are just your, some generous donations. The Auto Tech received a few automobiles, which is great.
Yeah,
Is this a typo on these amounts? I'm confused as,
no, it's not.
I'm just curious, is this like some, I don't know, what's the,
We turn them in as we receive them.
Yeah.
okay, I mean, it's nice, it's generous.
Any
but
donation, no matter what the amount, we,
I was just surprised by
Noted.
the, okay.
Who
I just
determines the
don't understand.
value, the owner?
of the cars? Brad, I think it is the owners,
I'm
and
not-
ask the
huh?
owners. Right. It's for their tax purposes. They're gonna,
Whatever their tax professional
Right.
uses it for.
right,
Yeah,
You're not intended for appraising.
right.
okay.
And we provide them the tax paperwork.
Okay. Anything else? Mr. Gaynor?
Voting is open.
I have questions on facilities. Should I wait for other business or when Mr. Petcack's at the microphone? Mr. President.
Say that again.
If I have questions in regard to facilities, should I wait till later in other parts of our agenda?
Is that old business? Unfinished business? What is it?
Yes.
Okay, then wait.
Okay, that's cool. I have no problem. I got a list of stuff. You've been warned.
Yeah, voting's closed.
Okay, the motion passes. So we can take G1 and 2 together, right?
Have to take them separately.
Okay, G1, financial reports. I'll take a motion to approve
So
them.
moved.
Second.
Want to take one?
Mr. Gaynor?
The monthly financial reports and five-year forecast. The only thing that I want to note about the five-year forecast is nothing's changed substantively. This forecast from the previous one is that we do expect to see some motion on the Kaiser issue.
I was going to ask about that.
So, we've had some conversation, spoken with the superintendent, and we're hopeful that within the next 2 to 3 months, we will have some resolution and we'll have a definitive number for those two numbers that we're reserving for the Kaiser tax complaint. So, just a little foreshadowing that you will see hopefully a significant change to the forecast in a positive direction.
We're hoping.
Within the next few months.
Well, I think we've been hoping for that for a while.
We have, yeah.
Any questions? Okay, Mr. Gaynor.
Voting is open. And the voting is closed.
Okay, the motion passes. Okay. I'll accept a motion to approve G2.
So moved.
Second.
Moved in second. Any discussion?
I'll just note this is an audit requirement. It's a confirming purchase order. It was a purchase order that was closed at the end of last fiscal year, and the invoice came in this year. So once the purchase order is closed at the end of the fiscal year, there's technically no purchase order in place for it, so the board has to approve it. It's called a confirming purchase order.
So what do we do? Do another?
Yeah, we just do a new purchase order for it, but it's considered after the fact because the invoice came in before a purchase order is in place for it. So best practice by the auditor state is that anything over a certain threshold, under a certain threshold, I can sign a then and now certificate saying even though the purchase order wasn't in place, we had the money for it. But if it's over a threshold, then it comes to.
It's 5,000 threshold?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions? Mr. Gaynor?
Voting is open. Oh, okay, it says motions needed. Okay, we're having a technical difficulty, so we have to do a voice
Technical
on it.
difficulty.
Mr. Register.
Yes.
Mr. Posh.
Yes.
Mr. Zucker.
Yes.
Mr. Silverman.
Yes.
Ms. Wright.
Okay. I don't have a report tonight, except for homecoming, I guess. But it could be announcements. And we'll let the superintendent do that. Unfinished business?
Oh, okay. I got on my list. Mr. Petcack, you're on. I'm starting with you. I got some other ones. Okay, first question. Actually, it's a common question / compliment that we open up our new high school with a new traffic pattern, and we opened up the middle school with a new building and traffic pattern, and I didn't hear a peep about any problem. So apparently,
Surprising, isn't it?
we did the same thing when we opened it the first time with Wiley. It seems like it went. Did it go as smoothly or no?
It's going smooth.
Okay.
For now, it's going very smooth. Parents are learning alternate routes, just like they do at the high school.
Yeah. But otherwise, it went off relatively. It wasn't.
Yes, sir.
Cool deal. My next question would be, we were talking, I guess, I got a bunch of middle school questions. Or let me go back to the high school. High school, because we haven't had a meeting with anyone from PMC, Jim and I, in a while. When do we expect to have a next batch of change orders to review?
You will not receive any more change orders.
Oh,
They're all being done with the contingency.
okay. Then then the question would be, I don't need an answer now, but I'd be nice to know what's left in that contingency.
I thought you were scheduled for another meeting, and I can check that with
Yeah,
Mary
it's-
tomorrow, but she can share the
Okay.
log with you.
Because in that case, if we don't have anything on the high school, I would be curious to see when we're going to talk with our friends at Moody Nolan, because I got a set of drawings from, Mary was able to get me drawings, and I have a number of questions I'd like to go over with them.
Which drawings did she share with
The
you?
middle schools, the schematics.
But there's schematic drawings.
Mhm.
You know, tomorrow's the page turn for the middle school, so I have a bunch of employees meeting with the engineers, and they're going through page by page just to look, because of course you're going to have the GMP presented to
Right.
you very soon.
So,
So
yeah.
hopefully you have the most current drawings.
Pretty recent.
Okay.
I got some, well, I got more, I'm not like, hey, why is this outlet over this wall? More generalized questions I do have for them.
Right now, I have a meeting tomorrow with principals to go over the educational plan. We're going to have a presentation to cabinet the following Tuesday by Moody Nolan to review where we're currently at. And we did discuss setting up a new meeting with the two of you so we can start that process on the middle schools.
Okay, because that's what I'm looking for that. And then along with dovetail with that is I know we were, two other components. One would be, we were discussing, we had a lot of debate and discussion in regard to middle school furniture. We were going one route, and then another later on, there was discussion of going a slightly different route. So the question now would be, where are we currently in that sort of fluid dynamic of middle school furniture?
Well, right now, there's a lot of evaluation that has to happen, a lot of cleaning out that has to happen. Where I'm currently at, Doug and I are developing a plan to attack that based on an inventory of what's existing. Then I have to compare it to the educational plan that we're going to have at the two middle schools. Once we have that, we want to ensure that we're accounting for the amount of student seats and the teacher's desk that we're going to require and the cabinetry and so on. When we have that firmed up with Moody Nolan, and they're going to be involved in that, then I have to go to the two middle schools and assess each piece of furniture to say, do we want to keep this or not keep it? Then I have to, when I get those numbers, I need to go to the middle school over here, the current middle school, because we believe that some of our better furniture is actually in use right now. Assess all that furniture and come up with, this is the number of student desks. We have, 1,000 student desks we feel are reusable. I have 350 I have to get rid of. I got 600 teacher desks I have to dispose of. Once we come with that, then I have to figure out how I'm going to pay for 600 additional desks, teacher desks, and so on. That all has to happen in the next couple months.
So it's
Because
in-
before I turn this over to Turner Construction, I have to have both those buildings empty.
So it's in process, you don't have, but we don't have.
I had more hair yesterday, so yes, it's still in process, yeah.
I want to say anything. And then going down that pathway, oh, I'm
Can
sorry.
I just
Yeah, sure.
interrupt real quick? George walked Cal and I through the building with Doug, and oh my, and there is so much stuff in those buildings. I mean, beakers from the 50s. I mean, probably several thousands of those. You go in the basement, there's old pieces of motors that are there that when they put a new motor in generations ago, they left the old one. This stuff has to come out. And I know it's not included in Turner's project, that's all on us. The amount of furniture that's sort of left behind, it's mind-boggling. And I just can't see how you and
We're
your
gonna do
people
it.
are gonna do
Kind of
it. I mean,
confidence.
I'm grateful. And, hearing the stuff that you've been able to salvage from the high school, the good stuff, that, could go into some of the science rooms.
I'm already working on actually plans to that point where I'm going to confirm with Moody Nolan what's in the current demolition, which is nothing. So if you go to the science labs right now, they're not touching any sinks. Whatever's sitting there is what we're going to have when we walk back in. So we did salvage all of the casework out of the high school science, and right now I have the trades looking at what will it take between now and March to how many classrooms could we actually get into and repurpose this casework into that, doing it in-house. So we have, it's going to be challenging, but we're going to do our best to take care of it before the contractor takes over. We could save it and then do it afterwards, but it would be nice to have it presentable when the students come back.
One of
go
my
ahead, go ahead.
biggest takeaways from the walkthrough is the amount of space that's going to be, mothballed is not the right word, but
It's taken offline, and we're addressing, that's one of the reasons we're meeting tomorrow, is to make sure that the current layout and floor plan is going to address our needs as we move forward.
yeah, I'd be real curious to see how that pans out, just to see if we really accommodated for the true amount of square footage that we really need. I mean, that whole art section in the basement,
In the art rooms, we looked at the floor plans. I was asking Mr. Stone what he had, because there's floor plans that are out there to show you the educational reuse of the building. And it shows you that the art rooms are going up to the second floor, and where they're going actually to two old science classrooms. So again, tomorrow we're meeting with the principals to sort of just confirm that we're okay, or if there's issues, then we're going to bring that to Moody Nolan and say, how do we address this without it costing us any money?
We had this discussion a bit when, as Jim mentioned, when we walked through. I know there's an overwhelming desire to reuse, and everyone understands that. I think, as we discussed, there's trying your best to figure in opportunity cost and the difficulties associated with a rigorous enough timeline and sorting through. It isn't always the best choice to keep just because something is in borderline decent condition. Added to the fact, as we discussed, that storing things for the amount of time you have to store, which is a couple of years, is it correct?
Right.
Again, the condition of the item may not be the same 2 years from now as it is now. So it is a large task. Jim's exactly right. And again, I think people always are anxious to say, oh, I can't believe we threw something out. Oftentimes that is still the better choice.
And I'm going to evaluate that approach. I mean, and I still have to talk to the storage company that rents these shipping containers. They say they're waterproof and airtight. I would see what type of guarantee they have and so on.
Right, and again, moisture and water are slightly
Not good for a
different.
furnace, right?
yeah, I mean.
Any heat.
Right, humidity and heat, right, exactly. That's all.
Well, no, and I would agree with that. I think the issue is that, obviously the opportunity costs and logistics. The flip side is that I think we have to do all due diligence we can, because we can't, if we just say, okay, we're just gonna go buy all new, our critics and the public are gonna say, hey, why didn't you do that? So if we come back, if we do, I hate to say it, of course it's on George, is that we have to do our due diligence, because if we don't, then, we didn't do our job, and George didn't do his job, I guess. And that's when we did the assessment tours, going through the buildings, all in the crawl spaces and what have you. My favorite was, when you mentioned engines, was in the basement, the sub-basement of the high school, as you're walking through in this crawl space, and then here's like this old Packard engine, which was like an emergency generator. Just how they got it in there, I don't know, but it was just, boom, buried in the bowels of the building. So I very familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah, but that was a whole lot easier. I mean, because you were essentially demoing a big part of that. They basically take a crane, they take the metal hooked stuff, they throw it in a pile, and it goes away. This, I have no idea how you're going to get some of this stuff out of the building.
Well, and part of it,
Well, the good news is we have George.
I mean, I have a lot of faith in George.
We'll figure it out.
You really have a good handle on it.
we'll solve it.
You understand what the problem is, which is half the problem.
Going down that pathway, I've been out of the loop a little bit. What are we in regard to, because we had a very protracted effort on the high school in regard to anything that was historic, memento, was there any we had a very specific crew for that on the high school project. We didn't find much, but there was only a couple areas to really go through. I know there's a gentleman over at Monticello who's been very, very, in the music department, always finding stuff. What is our process for sort of going between, okay, this is beakers from the 50s versus here's the opening program from Monticello in 1930.
And somebody has already addressed some items. I know that, because I want to say it was Doug brought to my attention that somebody said, hey, you need to go to Monticello Music, look up there, and there's some, I don't know if it's a trumpet, or there's a couple instruments up there that definitely look old. And those things, again, I will make sure that we save everything and it's looked at. I even had Kara brought up, O'Donnell from the city said, hey, just wanted to make sure that we had something in place to protect the historical pieces. And before anything is pitched or discarded, it will have an opportunity to be looked at.
I would suggest, especially because the building's now closed, that if you want, I think if you approach the folks who are on the preservation
school.
committee, one of their spouses is in the audience this evening. There's a handful of other ones as well. I think if you found a Saturday morning and said, hey, can you guys go through Monticello and Roxborough this morning, and someone's going to be there, I'm sure that they'd be happy to. Again, what we noticed was it was primarily the main office, the library, the music rooms were pretty much the only places where you would find anything really of value, unfortunately, because pretty much anything else has been chucked.
I've walked both buildings numerous times, and I've noticed, from trophies to
Right.
plaques on a wall to instruments and things that will definitely not get thrown away.
Okay. So that's in process as well.
Yes.
Okay, then I think my next one is well, this is going to be a leading question comment. There was another tour of the high school for the High School Community Congress. That was not this Sunday, the previous Sunday, I think it was. That went over real well. However, the tour was supposed to be a handful of areas, but we noticed that people then started to meander, if you will, and created their own tour of the entire building. So I'm just going to, I guess, ask a question I know the answer to, I think. I believe at present we still have no plans on putting any partitions anywhere in the building to inhibit.
Currently, no. Again, we're trying to find out how the process is going to work. Currently, all the classrooms are supposed to be locked in the evenings. For the tours, if they're breaking off, I'm unaware that they're breaking off and going on their own guided tours.
It quickly dissolved, and we had folks all over the building.
You
So
see,
I
our
was-
like the pool use and for other events, I have not heard any concerns whatsoever. So this is the first I'm hearing about. I'll talk with Mr. Loretz in the morning and find out what we can do
So
to address that.
I wanted to confirm that. And then another item, which we talked about before, was, I'd mentioned, and then we got some materials, we're doing there were some issues in regard to room numbering and room names, because I still see people having stuff taped over other, yeah.
That's still part of an expectation that we're waiting resolution on.
Okay, I guess if we're still waiting on resolution for that, I had mentioned some naming of some names, some rooms after previous, we had named some spaces after some folks in the past, as well as some classrooms after buildings. I wasn't sure where that was in process, and there was one, I know we received samples of how districts name spaces, and actually, if anything, I actually prefer ours, because it's very ambiguous, so it gives you a lot of elasticity. And I know Mr. Register, I think, was joking, but I have a motion, ready to make a motion and not to name a space after Mr. Chipoletti, so whenever you want that motion, I'll make the motion.
We also have Beverly, who had some names of some similar spaces. So I think
Good.
it would be to our benefit to talk about what that process will look like and then the naming, because we have several board members who want similar spaces named after different people. So how we want to resolve that, we still need to. I mean, I think your idea, Eric, to name some of those common spaces after old schools, I mean, I thought it was, we
Right.
talked about it, I thought it was a good idea. And I know Brad has been working with Brian and the others to think about what that looks
Right.
like. But when we get to naming spaces after people, we
Right.
really need a process, because it's just not the
Right.
name you
Right.
provide, someone else provided other names. And I think a public process or board process, however we want to come up with, I think will be needed. Yeah.
Well, I think we ought to, try to get a process and then see if there are names. I think. So, it was the superintendent and some of her staff, and we'll try to work our way through
Get that.
a recommendation.
Okay.
And then the last item I have for George which is probably more for the board, but George is there, so I'm gonna ask it now. There was, after the high school opened, there was an email circulating around which had the unfortunate misnomer of being called a post-mortem in regard to the high school project as far as an analysis. I know we were thinking of the idea of us having sort of a work session where we could do what I would prefer the nomenclature Cal's familiar with. We use an after-action review to look at critically what we saw were strengths and flaws, if you will, in the high school process, to queue those up to be prepared for those for the middle schools. My question would be, since we have 3 board members exiting relatively soon, who've been with us for a long time, are we looking at scheduling that before we depart?
That's the November work session
Okay,
topic.
okay. Good, okay.
And remember, we moved that work session to a different date,
Yes, it kept bouncing
Yeah,
around. I'll just
yeah.
wait till I get the notice.
15th, I
the
think.
15th.
Okay.
But that's the topic we said November we thought would be a good time.
Okay.
And I think we call it lessons learned from.
And you have all the new board members who would be voted in by that time, so, because they certainly need to, yeah, I mean, they need to hear the story,
Right.
just as well as the Bond Accountability
Right, that's
Commission.
why I said
They're
the
gonna
bond,
hear
yeah.
the story,
Yeah.
and the trials and tribulations, and the successes, and the issues,
Right.
so.
I have to say, Eric,
Yes.
I want notification. If you got that much airtime to use with George,
Oh,
I'd like to manage that a little bit better.
okay.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, we're in new business. We had a conversation at some point about putting together a consent agenda. I think our superintendent has been thinking about that. Did you have some specific recommendations? I guess both of you
Yeah.
been talking about it.
Right. Well, remember we talked about at our retreat, if we change the conversation about how we do business at our meetings, it would give us the opportunity to talk about what's happening in our classrooms, in our schools. So we talk about academics and teaching and learning, and that become our main topic. And so a consent agenda will allow us to just vote one time on all of the other things. So we will spend, you vote once, and you vote for all of those financial issues, the personnel issues, the business issues, and the majority of the time will be given to what I call the heart of the district, and that's the teaching and learning.
So most of the things we could lump in the consent agenda
Correct.
and approve.
Yes.
We would still have some things, like those resolutions and stuff we have to pull out.
Perhaps, but by and large, these routine items would be a single item, and that's part of the issue that we had, even you saw in the meeting tonight.
Yeah.
The way that board docs and districts statewide do a consent agenda is, in the past, we've taken certain sections and said we'll vote on finance items 1 and 2 together, and a consent agenda is all items or everything is individual, one or the other, and that's the way the system is set up. So we've kind of worked around that to say, okay, personnel tends to be consent, so that's why personnel items are a consent agenda here, and everything else then must be taken separately.
Yeah.
But the way the system wants us to work a board meeting
Right.
is everything is a consent agenda, or everything is taken as a separate action item. So also, in addition to giving time to speak to other matters,
Right.
just the logistics of running a meeting.
Scott, on the surface, that makes sense. But, if we look at the way we've always done this, there's always items where we'll say, can we take these together, or does this, something need to be taken separately? So I'm confused as to things that in the past have been considered things you have to take separately. How can those be merged into a consent agenda?
We would have to identify those in advance. So it's going to require a little more planning on our part in terms of agenda management. And those tend to be specific personnel items or legal matters.
Yeah.
So what would happen is all of our routine items would be consent, kind of as you see now, the personnel were all consent. And then if there are any of those types of items, we would.
So it's
have
not
those.
really all or nothing?
So it wouldn't be an all or nothing,
It's
but
all of it.
traditionally, we would hope that most,
Okay.
during the
Yeah.
regular course
So-
of business, it would be a consent agenda. But if there are those types of items that must be taken apart from the others,
Right.
we can still do it.
Do you want to try to do that at the next two business meetings?
Well, I mean, the one question that, because I mentioned, we have 3 members cycling off who've been using a very similar methodology for going back to 1990s. The question I would pose is, I'm almost wondering, is that something that, I hate to kick it to the next board, but if you've got a new board majority coming in, I almost think that I'm reticent to say, hey, guys, on our way out the door, here's how we think you should run meetings, even though we didn't do it that for 20 years, but here, is there an argument to be made saying, you guys do the homework and research, and then say, what do you guys want to do next year? I mean,
Well,
that's,
to that point, we have a new board member orientation date already set. So perhaps at that orientation date, when we are going over the board handbook and those things, and there could be something. Because I think the bigger picture is we want to be able, we know that the business of the board is important. But we want to be able to speak more about what's happening in our district as teaching and learning. That's what we want, and we discussed this, we know. We want that to be the heart of our conversations. So I agree, maybe having that as part of, we can make the decision prior to the new board coming on, and that
We
would
can
be.
test it.
And we'll test it, right. But what it would do, it will, like now it's 8:15, it will, maybe the first 10 minutes, we're done with that other stuff, perhaps. And then we're using the other time to talk about maybe some, classroom visits, and curriculum and math, a lot of the stuff that Allison brought to our attention at our
Right.
data conversation. And that's what we want. We want the public to see us change the narrative and really talk about what's happening in our classroom and how our students are performing, et cetera, and really get into the dialogue of that and how the board can help lift that work and think about additional policies we need. We've already talked about changing our structure, how we approve policies, and having a policy committee now, and having people on ed services and principals and board members involved to really dive into those policies. So it's really to change the way we do our work. So I think we tested, I agree, maybe we tested, but we could add it to part of that new board orientation.
Yeah, I'd like to really comment on what Eric is saying here. First of all, I really like the idea of a consent agenda. I think it is the way it should go. Clumsily, approve personnel information, which really technically is your call anyways, and there's a public governance piece that, we have to legally approve it.
Right.
But it's far more important to know what's going on in the buildings, clearly.
Yeah.
But I just think it's kind of, I think it's inappropriate for this board to make that change now. I think the new board needs to make that change. Because you're really making, they can change it back, but if it was a majority, if the majority was going to be here in January, I would think otherwise. But the issue here is the two people standing are Beverly and I, and we're not a majority at this point. I think the majority of the board has to make this call. I'm going to support it because I like the idea of the consent agenda, so I would vote for this. And I would love to see how it goes, but in reality, we're changing a really big thing for an upcoming board that they really should have a say in this.
Let me just ask this question. It's a new board, so they're not accustomed to either way, right? So we're not changing anything they've done. What we're saying is we're focusing the attention on what we think is most important. They absolutely, and you as the standing members can say, hey, look, as at the orientation, the way we used to is this way. If you prefer this, let's talk about. We'll change it. We can all change it back. But I don't see where us making a statement that we think this is the, I don't think we're really doing anything that can't be undone easily in this case. And it's not, they're not doing something they've ever, it's not like, oh my gosh, we've been doing this for years and now they change it on us at the last second. They haven't been doing anything. I mean, no, that's the wrong way to put that. Take it back, take it back. They haven't been doing any meeting type structure so far. So I mean, I don't have the same issues you do. And I normally, I appreciate the sensitivity. And I normally would think, I hate tying the hands of future board members, but we're not tying their hands anyway.
Again, I think the optics of, hey, on the way out the door, we're changing the way it's been pretty much done for the last 20 years. I think, we can pilot it now and say, hey, guys, here's how it's queued up. If anything, my issue would be, that's why I always make a motion on these boilerplate stuff, because let's just get it out of the way. My bigger issue is, I think that the only way, if you're going to go consent, is if you're going to use board docs, go with consent, because I think board docs is slow, it's cumbersome. I understand the idea of it, but I don't think it is it makes these meetings longer, because am I on the line, am I logged in or not? I'm waiting for this, as opposed to boom, 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 boom. So if you're going to keep board docs, go to consent just to get this junk out of the way. But I think let the next board make that decision of how they want to run their meetings. That would be my take.
Love your language.
Thank you.
Let's get this junk out of the way. So my guess is that we can go ahead and look at our next meeting, see what it feels like. When we get us all together in November, we can talk about it. Okay? Anything else under new business?
I got Allison's in the audience. We had, before our
Got
next,
board, huh?
you said for the next meeting, I have some, after our last meeting on data, I have some questions for data for next week, so I'll get that before you leave.
Okay.
What?
And remember,
You
he
got
just has,
what?
he just needs to see Allison about
You got a
some-
public question for Allison?
I could make it public, or
I mean, what,
You're just saying you want to see her.
I want to see Alice, because our next meeting's about data. We had a two-part
Allison.
meeting.
can you visit with Eric after the meeting? Okay, she's gonna do it.
It's like the board docs. I got to have a facilitating agent say, okay.
Okay. What about board committee? Anything?
The Bond Accountability Commission has a meeting next week.
Correspondences and announcements?
So we have our new community homecoming parade that will begin at 5:15 Friday at Fairfax and travel north on Lee Road to the corner of Tullamore. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Tullamore. The community and school groups will participate, so we're excited that we're going to have the band, so this is a new parade route. And thank you again to the city and all those who have worked instrumental to have this parade. We're excited about it. We have the football game and some other activities that are happening this weekend. So it should be a big weekend for homecoming. And it's Eric's 30th class reunion this weekend.
Why do you have to bring that up?
And so I know he will be participating in a lot of the festivities. Yes.
Great.
Yes.
Just because you say I'm going to participate doesn't, well, I will, just FYI, as we were mentioning, there is another open house of the high school this Saturday from 10 to
Yes.
12. Mr. Wortman, is it comparable, it's not going to, compared to the big open house, is it going to be more self-contained or is it more free range? Okay, so it'll be another free range, okay.
Yep.
That's from 10 till?
To noon.
Okay.
Yep.
So the pool will be open? That was a big
Is that's
highlight of the last one.
Yep.
that's Saturday?
Saturday, yes.
Yep.
Anything else?
And don't forget our MSAN student conference. So please RSVP with Caroline if you're going to attend. We have a Heights High grad, Jeff Johnston, who will be speaking that night. So the team, Felicia, and who have worked been instrumental in helping get this kicked off, and the students are excited to host their first conference. So it's going to be a big deal. So we're excited.
That is next week?
It's the 18th
18th.
through the 21st.
Yeah, the dinner's the 18th.
Yes, the dinner is the 18th. That's Wednesday, so,
Right. I think the only reason, because I was going to plug out because we had 2 candidates for school board. There's a candidates forum coming up at Oxford on, I think, next Monday. And another, the League of Women Voters is Wednesday, the 18th. So, and tomorrow night. There's another one tomorrow, okay.
Boulevard.
That's what I'm thinking. That's what, yes.
gotcha. All right.
So-
Anything else?
Yeah,
Okay.
so also the work session,
Yes, the work session will be at Heights High School, the second part of the data presentation. So we'll be back in the room.
That's the
on a mini
17th.
auditorium, yes, on the 17th.
so it's part 2
Part 2.
of the data. So watch part 1. It's probably one of the best work sessions we've ever, I mean, that is
Yes,
good
yes.
stuff the community really needs to know about.
Yes, yes.
Far more exciting
Yeah.
than
And it answers
board
all,
docs in this meeting.
does it answer all the questions left unanswered from the first one?
You mean the second one?
No, the second one. Does the second one answer the questions from the first one?
More craziness.
Okay,
Yes.
never mind.
Okay,
We'll
it's
vote
fine.
on it. No one knows.
I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Gainer.
Voting's open.
Look at cinematic references. It's a good thing I'm leaving.
Here, Rick.
This crowd. And I avoided making Carl Perkins jokes for 4 years about that grant.
Voting is closed.
Be nice and try to play your part.
Okay, we are adjourned.